Good morning to all of you in the Dharma. Are you all quite comfortable? Okay, I hope not too comfortable that you fall asleep. That's a problem of being too comfortable sometimes. Now, this morning, as you know, we have an exhibition in the hall. Normally we would have a talk in the hall, but this morning we have it here. Well, actually in the past, we have always had our talk here. It's got a very nice atmosphere, and provided it's not too hot, it's very nice because we feel much closer together rather than in the hall itself. Now, this morning I've been asked to give a talk, and the topic today is the flight of the fair bird. Now, I know the title comes from a book written by Reverend Gull. It's called Flight of the Fair Bird, but the contents is slightly different. It's not the same. Now, in the Flight of the Fair Bird, perhaps a good way of starting the talk is to talk about a story which was being sold in this book called Jonathan Livingstone Seagull. I'm not sure how many of you have read the book. Have you read this book? Jonathan Livingstone Seagull? Yes. Now this book topped the bestseller. It's a very small book, almost like a kind of a very simple story with lots of pictures of seagulls flying around. Now the story actually is about a seagull. It's just about seagull. No human beings involved. Just one seagull by the name of Jonathan. Now this Jonathan, unlike the other seagulls, just wants to fly. The other seagulls just fly in order to feed themselves. They'll fight for little morsels of food at the seaside when the fisherman throws the bread and crumbs of bread and all the fish. So the seagulls will just start eating all this food. But Jonathan is not so interested in that. He is interested, really, in learning how to fly, and to fly very well. So he will go far away just to try his nose dive, his twirls and turns and all that. And all the other seagulls thought he was crazy. He says, why don't you be like us, like the other seagulls, Why do you want to do all this kind of funny things, just flying, like an aeroplane? So, in fact, it seems that one day he discovered a way in which he could fly very, very fast. By pulling in his wings, he could fly very fast. Much, much faster than what an average seagull could do. So when he did that, he flew into a kind of some other seagulls, and all of them had to fly away to make way for him, like some people riding motorbikes. Very fast, you have to make way for them. And after that, the council of seagulls called him forward, and they cast him out of the seagulls. They say, you go away from this community of seagulls, we do not want you. So it seems that Jonathan had to live alone, meanwhile practicing his flight. Until one day there was another seagull, very bright in color, who flew alongside with him. And no matter what Jonathan did, the seagull was able to keep up the same speed and in the same style. If Jonathan decides to kind of turn around, that other seagull will turn around. And that seagull was able to fly just 1 inch away from Jonathan. And that seagull actually brought Jonathan to another place. And that place is supposed to be heaven, you see, where all the other seagulls gather down there to learn. Those are the people who those are the seagulls which try to perfect their flight. Now, sometimes you look at a story like this, you say, what kind of story is that? It's all about seagulls. But I think the story has a very important story to tell. Like, if you look at most of us, the community of seagulls is like humanity in general, society in general. Society for what it is. Many people think that their purpose of life is just, earning a living, feeding themselves, and and they keep on doing that until one fine day. That is a time when they would have to say goodbye to everybody, and then they will go away. And there are very few people like Jonathan who feels that life is much more than just learning how to fly. There is a much higher aim in life. In the case of Jonathan, it is learning how to fly. In the case of a human being, it's to lift ourselves up above the masses, in order to search for a way to improve our qualities. Now, this is what Buddhism is all about. In order to develop our qualities. Each of us have qualities, as well as certain things which are not so good. Now, the purpose of Buddhism is to try to reduce the unwholesomeness, all the things which are not so good in us, and to develop on our good qualities. So in a sense, all of us are like Jonathan Livingston Seagull when we say we want to become a Buddhist. So actually the Buddha says that all of us can be dynamic beings. We can all be dynamic beings. We can change, we can transform ourselves with the Dhamma. We can be dynamic beings when we understand the nature of the universal laws, when we understand the nature of the Dharma, and we learn how to tap the immense energy that lies within our own minds. Within every one of us is an enormous energy. But the problem is that we do not know how to tap this energy. We waste our energy. Don't you think we waste a lot of our energy? Wasting our energy doing this and doing that. Our mind is always easily distracted. We're not making use of a smallest portion of what we're capable of. We're only making use of a little part of what we're truly capable of. So when we begin to understand the Dharma, we tap within us this huge, enormous resources, of energy, and if you want it, power, which lies within every one of us. Now there is also an analogy which is given in this, it's about this man who one day had another friend and they started drinking and he was drunk. Now this man had a jewel with him. A very precious jewel. Now because his friend had to go away and because he was drunk, the friend took the jewel and hid it in his turban and the friend went away. And this man, when he got up the next morning, he was looking for this jewel. And for 7 years he searched for this jewel and couldn't find it. And because of that he lived like a beggar, like a pauper. Until one day he came across his friend and said, "Hey, do you remember that night when we were drinking? Did you happen to see where I placed my jewel?" And the friend says, "As far as I could remember, I had to go away, so I put the jewel in your turban." And of course he forgot to look for the jewel in the turban. He looked everywhere but not in his turban, which is with him all the time for 7 years. And when he opened up the turban, sure enough the jewel is there. Of course, he never washed his turban also. That's just terrible. But never mind about the washing. Perhaps those days the detergent also not many detergent. You can't find Fab and all those things. Never mind, no washing machines. But the moral of the story is just like this man, we are all moving out with this enormous potential within ourselves, but we have not learned how to use it. What a waste. What a waste. It's like a person who can walk perfectly well, but who decides to become lame. We are all lame because we do not make use of this energy within us. And the Dharma shows the way on how we should tap it within ourselves. So the Buddha taught us to walk the spiritual path, on how we can always maintain a pure mind, or how we can always improve our speech so that our speech is beneficial. Sometimes our speech is not beneficial. Sometimes when we speak something, many people get devastated. They collapse. Sometimes some people, when they speak, are so powerful. It's worse than taking poison. You hear that, people begin to think about it day in and day out. Night and day they think about what people say. So our tongue is can be sometimes very dangerous. And yet, sometimes it can be very, very useful. Because when we speak well, we bring about harmony around us. People feel happy. People feel delighted, to hear some things. But sometimes when people speak some things, wow, it is terrible. Very, very terrible. It goes right into the heart. And sometimes that person never forgets it because it's buried in the heart. So very, very careful. And the other thing we have to watch is also our body. So the Buddha teaches us how we must watch our 3 doors of action. Our speech, body, and mind. And the Buddha says that if a person were to speak or act with an impure thought or with impure mind, then trouble will follow him. Like the wheel will follow the ox that draws the cart. This is from the Dhammapada. When the ox draws a cart, if a person were to do evil things, the trouble will follow him like that. the bullock will pull the cart, and the wheels will always follow the hooves of the bullock that pulls the cart. All right? Do you understand the analogy? You got a cart and you got the bull which pulls the cart, and each step the bulls walk, the cart will follow. So if a person were to speak with evil mind or act with evil mind, it will be like that. Trouble will follow him like that. But if a person were to act like a pure mind, then happiness will follow him like a shadow which never leaves him. Yeah? So in the Dharma, the Buddha has given a lot of advice on how we can live a good life. Right. Now, I'm not going to talk a lot about this because I think this will form a topic of some other talks. What I'm going to talk about is that as we will walk along the spiritual path, there are two kinds of things which we have to think about, two factors we have to think about. Number one is a factor of what we call self-reliance. The other is what we call a factor of fellowship. Now, sometimes when the Dharma is being practiced or the Dharma is being taught, sometimes we might practice one aspect in exclusion of the others. Now, this is not quite the right way to practice the Dharma. Some people say, oh, you have to be entirely self-reliant. Even if a friend is in trouble, never mind, you have to be self-reliant. And that poor friend is so helpless. Now, that is not the right attitude. There must be a good balance between self-reliance and fellowship. Now, first of all, let me talk about self-reliance before going over to fellowship. When we walk the road, the spiritual path, we must cultivate the noble quality of self-reliance. This quality is important even in worldly affairs. We see that businessmen who are successful are those businessmen who are self-reliant. Those businessmen who depend on somebody else, you think can be successful or not? You depend on perhaps your friend, you depend on somebody else. You can depend on so many things. Now, if you're not self-reliant, you cannot actually, you don't really have complete control. Even like citing the example, the Korean example, I was reading about how Korea is able to develop themselves under this president of Park Chung-hee. Now, Park Chung-hee one day was flying over the village in a helicopter. Then when he landed there, the villagers said, oh, President Park, why don't you give me this? Why don't you give us that? Why don't you give us that? And the village needs the village needs a well, the village needs this and that. So finally, President Park stood up and he says, you see, I was flying in a helicopter and I saw that there's a river nearby and I see that all of you are growing millet. And I know that millet don't need a lot of water. Unlike paddy, which needs a lot of water, millet don't need a lot of water. And all you need to do is just to take some water and transfer it from the river to the millet. Why don't you do it yourself? Why don't you help yourself? So he has always promoted this idea of self-reliance, self-help. You must learn how to help yourself. Only then can you make some kind of progress. If you sit back and let somebody else do it for you, you cannot make good progress. There is also this story about this pilot. It's a real story. In fact, this article came out in the Voice of Buddhism on how this pilot was actually flying and something went wrong with the engine. And when it went wrong, at that time he panicked, really panicked, didn't know what to do. And he was almost on the verge of crashing until he suddenly realized that, he came across a Buddhist book and came across the book called Self-Reliance. So at that time, he kind of took control over himself. He calmed down. And he relied on himself, and with that he was able to land his aircraft, his plane safely. This is to show you how important self-reliance is sometimes. So, even in the worldly affairs, you need some measure of self-reliance. What more if we want to develop ourselves spiritually? Now remember that when we practice Buddhism, it is not that somebody else can do many things for you. Now the Buddha is so compassionate. Now, if there are things which the Buddha can do for you, he would have done it for you. If somebody were to tell the Buddha, in order that everybody, arrives at nirvana, and if you ask the Bodhisattva, the Buddha to walk on charcoals on his knee around the world, and on burning charcoal, on burning fire, if it is possible that by so doing, the whole world can be saved, the Buddha would have done that. He would have done that without a second thought. We have read from the stories of the Dhammapada how he sacrificed himself even for animals, for beings which are so small that many people don't even consider them to be living beings. He would sacrifice himself even for that. What more for humanity? He sacrificed his whole family in order to seek for truth. But after finding the truth, there are certain things which the Buddha could do. There are certain things which we have to do ourselves. You see, because if the Buddha could do everything for you, then the Buddha would have done it for you. But in the practice of Buddhism, there are many things which we have to do ourselves. Because I mentioned earlier that in Buddhism, it is our good qualities which we need to cultivate. Now, who can cultivate the good qualities for you? If you don't cultivate it yourself. Right? It's as easy as that. Huh? If you do not make the effort of changing your ways, who can do it for you? Because people can only advise you. People can provide the conditions for you. But it is we ourselves who must make the effort. And that is why we say that self-reliance is important. We have to make the effort. We have to try to change our ways. We have to try to be more positive beings, to be kinder, to be more compassionate, to act with more wisdom, to be less selfish. We must make the effort. Others can only provide the conditions. Others cannot do this for us. Now, when we practice this quality of self-reliance in traveling the spiritual path, there must be some other things which we must bear in mind. There is this quality of having vision and goal. We need to have a vision. Now, I think if you are to ask me, what is the most important thing which the Buddha has given to humanity? Well, some people will say the Buddha has given the Dharma, but to be closer, to pinpoint, I would say the Buddha has given us a vision. The Buddha has given us a spiritual vision. A vision which shows us the path on which we can move onwards. I think this is a major contribution of the Buddha to the world. A vision. A vision which shows that there is a way upwards. So don't let us behave like what we are doing every day. Going around the meal, going through the days, waking up in the morning, brushing your teeth, going to work, coming back, watching video, going to sleep, repeating the same cycle again and again. Don't be like that. There is a spiritual vision ahead of us. And the Buddha has also shown us the example. He is the living example of that vision. He is the actualization of that vision. So this is the most important message which he has given to the world. This spiritual vision, this inspiration to the world, that it is possible, like Jonathan Livingston Seagull. All of us are like Jonathan Livingston Seagull. Don't be discouraged if people tell you, forget it, that you must be crazy to do such thing. Why do you go to the temple every Sunday? You must be, what is there to do in the temple? Many people will tell you that. But don't be moved by such a thing, like Jonathan Livingston Seagull. Remember, there is a vision which leads us onwards. And I think this is a major contribution of the Buddha to humanity. That we always need to have this vision in the mind, to have the foresight to see beyond the narrow confines of everydayness, of repeating the cycle every day. Although we have to go through life day by day, hour by hour, yet we know that there is a vision which will free us one day. To have this vision, this foresight, this goal. And this vision transcends time and space. This vision goes above time and space. We are no longer bound by space and time. This vision of complete enlightenment. Secondly, you also need to have faith and confidence. Now, sometimes when you stress that Buddhism teaches us to be enlightened, that Buddhism says on enlightenment, on wisdom, sometimes people forget the importance of faith. Sometimes, it's really sad. People think that Buddhism is just sitting down reading books and getting involved in intellectual discussions. Now, if you do that, you're still far away from it, I think. Sometimes you find that people might not be so highly educated. They might not be even educated at all. The farmers, whatever, lead a very simple life, but heart is very pure. And sometimes I think they are much better Buddhists than people who sit down and get involved in intellectual discussions. Empty. Heart is empty. So remember that faith is very important. Faith and the Dharma. And that is why sometimes when I had an opportunity to go to Britain just a for about 3 months or so. Well, that was about a few weeks ago. I was in London. Now I'm here, only about 3 weeks ago. And I came across this Buddhist group. They are mainly English people, but you have Germans and you've got New Zealanders and all that. And they emphasize two very important things in their practice. Number one, they emphasize on meditation. You wake up about 6 or 7 o'clock and get involved in a puja and do meditation. Second thing they emphasize a lot is puja, of making offerings to the Buddha, of strengthening your faith. Because puja is very, very important for us to develop our important qualities. Many people think that if you sit down and read the Dhamma book, you don't even have to attend puja. This is not quite correct. This faith is important because this is the fuel. This is your petrol, You might have this intellectual energy, very good engine. I don't know, you've got some fantastic car. Perhaps, let's say you have an Alfa Romeo sports car, very nice car. But you don't have oil, your car can't go, right? So it is the faith is the thing which makes the oil, which gives you the energy. So we have to cultivate our faith. Very important, don't neglect it. So you have this vision. You need to have this faith which provides the energy for your actions. Your spiritual energy comes from the faith. So don't belittle faith. Don't think that puja is not important. Don't think that putting your palms together, doing some kind of recitations, making offerings to the Buddha is not important. It is good to strengthen your faith. And faith and confidence in the Buddha Dharma is very important because there are certain times in our life when even the intellectual part will fail us. There will sometimes be some people who can put some discussions with you that their arguments are so convincing that even our intellectual reasoning doesn't seem to be able to stand up with that kind of argument. But it is at that time that faith comes in. It is faith that gives us strength to move onwards, even when everything around us seems to be completely hopeless. This is the importance of faith. The faith, the strength, the energy. And one of the very beautiful stories which I think I've spoken before, which many of you have heard before, of faith and confidence is the story of how the Bodhisattva, the very famous story, on how he was wrecked. He was traveling in this ocean, his whole ship was broken apart, and he was traveling with his old mother. And both of them was thrown in the open sea, in the stormy sea. And he swam for 7 days and 7 nights with his mother, clinging onto his back, because he wants to save his mother. He doesn't want the mother to die. So he swam without stopping for 7 days and 7 nights. Although at any time, I guess if he's like any one of us, we will of course either say, our mother's so old and we're so young, or, Of course, this is not a good thought, but people sometimes in that kind of consideration will sometimes say that. Sometimes a person might also say, never mind, let me and my mother both die, I'll also go and suffer so much. 7 days and 7 nights. But no, not the Bodhisattva. What keeps him going onwards? It is his faith, it is his confidence, that energy which says, I must keep on moving onwards to save my mother. Not for myself, but for my mother. And he swam for 7 days and 7 nights in the ocean. So much so that one Deva up there was so moved, of that kind of energy, that kind of faith he has, that Deva showed him the land. When you're in the ocean, you do not know where land is. So that Deva showed him the direction, and he was able to reach that land. And as he was swimming across the ocean, he says that just as I tried to save my mother from this ocean, may I one day be able to save all beings. And that is why in his last birth he appears. He works onwards to become the Buddha, so that he could give us the spiritual vision that we might all be safe. This is what we say faith, that kind of confidence, that kind of energy to move us onwards. Very important. Thirdly, of course, when you have a vision, when you have faith, you also need to have determination. Actually, determination and confidence goes together. When you believe in something, you have lots of determination. Very simple example. Look at our homes. All of us have mothers. Sometimes we have new mothers. Sometimes, I've never been a mother before, I can't say. But I've got a mother, and I've seen lots of mothers around. And I know that how mothers suffer, how they suffer first to deliver the child into the world, and after that, how they work for the whole family. Actually, a mother is most wonderful. She's on call 24 hours per day. Anytime when something is in trouble, she'll get up on call. And she works 7 days a week. She never asks for vacation. She never asks for any pay. Sometimes if you really want to get a worker like that, how much do you have to pay? Perhaps you can't even have one worker. You have many, many workers. To have a friend to be with you, to have an advisor to counsel you when you're in trouble, to have somebody to cook for you, to wash for you, to look after you. Isn't it wonderful? But what is the thing which keeps a mother or a father to keep on working? Works for the family, for love of the family, for love of the children. That's why sometimes the mother wash all the napkins, especially babies, wash all the napkins. Can we whistle some, washing everything? Washing away, she can enjoy herself. How can she do that? It is the love, the strong love which she has for the family that gives us the energy to move onwards. So when you have confidence, when you have faith, you have the determination. Don't give up. I was reading a story about this Thomas Edison who invents these lights. He was the first one who invents it. Most of the time when we try something, when we fail the first time, most people give up. Actually, most people don't even try. They think, sure cannot, sure give up. For instance, like contests, like sometimes you have this contest, can you guess where this building is, what city and all that. Most of us say, cannot win one. Most of us never try. Firstly, many of us will never try. We give up even before starting. That is number one. Secondly, there are some people who try, but after the first failure, they say, give up. Then some people will be strong enough to try the second time. If they fail second time, they give up. Very few people will try for the third or fourth time. Do you know how many times this Thomas Edison tried in order to invent the lamp? He tried it 10,000 times. He failed 10,000 times and he kept on trying. And only after that he became successful. Well, let me ask you, how many of us is like that, like Thomas Edison? Isn't it marvelous for a person who keeps on trying with that kind of determination, who never gives up? So even like Jonathan Livingston Seagull, even sometimes when we are discouraged in doing things which we know is good, even if we are inspired by this spiritual vision, do we easily give up? Do we, after trying, then say, people don't respond, never mind about all this dharma, let's do something else, let's do like what everybody is saying? Or do you have this determination to push onwards? The fourth quality that we need to do, besides having this vision, besides having this faith and confidence, besides having determination and energy, is also to be resourceful and to have initiative, to use your initiative, to invent new ways in which you could improve yourself. Develop some kind of initiative. Develop this kind of resourcefulness in your mind. Think about the Dharma. You come to the temple, you might listen to a talk. Sometimes I say that if I give a talk, if a person can remember one thing which I say good enough, most of the time some people come, I'm not sure how much they remember. Sometimes they come to a talk, they say, good, then step out of the hall, forget everything already. But if you could remember just only one thing, one good thing, one useful thing, try to see how you can apply this useful thing in your life. And if you can do this, your journey to the temple and journey back, spending a morning in the temple is worth it. Use your initiative to see how you could make use of some of the things which you have learned. You need to make use of initiative, of resourcefulness. Resourcefulness. Now, these are the qualities which goes around this idea of self-reliance. What we mean by self-reliance. Now, self-reliance doesn't mean practicing the Dharma alone. Now, I did mention that, in practicing the Dharma, we have to be self-reliant. Many people forget. They think, self-reliant means I stay at home and practice the Dharma. Never mind about the other people. Never mind if they break their precept. Never mind if they do this. Leave them alone. After all, they have to be self-reliant. If they suffer, it is because of their bad karma. This is not the right way of approaching the Dharma. This is not the right way. Of course, it doesn't mean that we go around forcing our views on other people. That is not quite correct either. Other people should be given the opportunity to develop themselves, because Dharma is very much internal. It's very much our own. We develop our understanding, our capacity for Dharma. So we give other people the opportunity to develop. Doesn't mean we force our views on them. But doesn't mean we leave them alone. Doesn't mean that. Doesn't mean that when we practice the Dharma, we travel alone. Why? Why is this so? Because the human lives are all interconnected with one another. Our lives are all interconnected. Of course you may say, oh, I'm like this and this, and you are like this. But our lives are all interconnected. Sometimes we might not realize this. Sometimes we think that, oh, never mind, as long as we look after ourselves. As long as we look after ourselves, as long as we prosper, never mind about the others. But remember that you cannot quite progress if the others don't make progress. Our lives are all interconnected, like a net. Sometimes they say like a net of Indra. I do not know why they say Indra, but it seems that Indra got this jewel net. And you know, if a net is interconnected, if you pull out one of the knots of the net, the whole net moves. Our lives are interconnected. And therefore, whatever we do gets reflected. So, if we have friends around us, and if our friends are also inspired to practice the Dharma, our practice of the Dharma will be strong. But sometimes if you practice the Dharma alone, very soon that energy will sometimes be forgotten. It's like taking a piece of, you have barbecue or whatever, you take a piece of burning charcoal and you leave it out in the open. At first the charcoal might burn bright, but after a while what happens? It will stop glowing, then it turns black. And then it will completely become cold. Many people are like that, unless you're like the Bodhisattva who's moved with the spiritual vision. Once you've got the spiritual vision, the fire never dies. The fire never dies when you have this vision. But before that, when we are on the spiritual journey, we just remove it, put it aside. After some time, it turns cold, like many of us. Sometimes very energetic. We practice the Dharma alone. After some time we say, never mind lah. First few days, wake up, do meditation, 6 a.m., very good. Before going at night, sleeping at night, do meditation. Then after a few days, you say, I've been doing meditation for the last 3 days. Today, never mind, give myself a holiday. First few days, wake up, do meditation, 6 a.m., very good. Before going at night, sleeping at night, do meditation. Then after a few days, you say, I've been doing meditation for the last 3 days. Today, never mind, give myself a holiday. And you find that you'll be giving yourself more and more holidays, and then after that you completely forget to do meditation. It's very, very easy. And that is why when we practice, it's kind of good to encourage our friends. If your friends meditate, and then they say, then they tell you about their meditation practice. Then if you have been going on holiday for 2-3 days, you also feel shy. Say, my friends so energetic. All my 3 friends have been meditating so hard, so I must also apply that kind of energy. That is why we need to travel together, because our lives are interconnected. Because if our friends improve themselves, their good quality will reflect on us. And we practice ourselves, we reflect our good qualities on the people around us. Our lives are all interconnected. And we also need others to improve our own qualities. You see, sometimes people think, you can practice the Dharma alone. Sometimes it is possible if the people around us is so terrible, and because if we move in that kind of environment, it's completely impossible for us to practice our Dharma. Sometimes it is necessary for us, like Jonathan Livingston Seagull, to go somewhere else and practice. But even in society, we can practice the Dharma because the other people around us gives us the opportunity to practice our qualities. Like some of my good friends around me in this very hall, some of my good friends are already started their family, already got married and about to start a family. Now, as a bachelor or as a single person, you can practice certain kind of qualities, right? But the moment when you begin to settle down and the moment when you begin to have families, then you begin to develop other qualities, which is not so easy for you to develop if you are single. Like quality of looking after your partner. Because when you begin to live with someone else, who's slightly different and different in way of looking at the world and all that, you need to have a lot of understanding, a lot of adjustments. And then you practice certain qualities of love. And when you begin to have children of your own, then you begin to develop certain kind of qualities, which is not so easy to practice if you're a single person. So sometimes you could see that it is with the presence of other people that we can practice our qualities much better. So that is why when we practice the Dharma, we need other people to help us to practice our qualities. And like Socrates, one day he looks very miserable. So his friend said, "Why do you look so miserable today?" He says, "Today, something happened. You see, every day my wife scolds me every day, but today don't know what happened, she never scolds me." Then the friend says, "Why do you feel miserable? You should be happy that your wife never scolds you." I think the wife must nag him a lot. He says, "How come Shakespeare, how come Socrates, you never do this, you never do that, So the wife must have nagged him a lot. So every day when the wife nagged him, okay, one day wife never nagged him, he feels so terrible. Then he says, "Why is that so?" So no, because today she never gave me an opportunity to practice my patience. Every day the wife gives him the opportunity to practice his good qualities. And so it's like that. Sometimes we can look at it from the other point of view. But when things are not good, just look at it as if it is an opportunity for us to practice our good qualities. So don't get upset, like Socrates. So therefore, when we practice this spiritual path, we need friends. We need friends along the path. And remember, many of us come to this temple how? Because of friends, right? Of course, some of us come because we read a book, so we come to the temple. But many of us come here because of friends. And what makes us remain here in this temple? Also because of friends. So you can see how important friends are. And remember the Buddha disciples. If you enter into the shrine hall, you've got two statues, two images beside the Buddha image. One is Sariputta and one is Moggallana. How did they come into touch with the Buddha? How did Sariputta and Moggallana come? Both of them are very good friends. It's because of friends, because of their case, they became the Buddha's great disciple. It seems that Sariputta heard a message taught by Asaji, who is one of the Buddha's disciples, and he was inspired. So he went to see the Buddha, and when he heard the Buddha, he was so inspired. And therefore he says, "I must carry this message to my good friend Moggallana." And when Moggallana heard it, Moggallana also became the Buddha's disciple. You can see how important friends are to practice a spiritual, but we need spiritual friends. Now the Buddha taught the importance of friendship, the importance of fellowship in several instances. Number one, the Buddha taught in the Mangala Sutta, that is the discourse on blessings. The Buddha says, avoid the company of fools. Fools means people who do a lot of evil things, who encourage you, come on, do this, come on, do that. And if you don't do that, they make fun. They say, yeah, you're like that, you're scared and all that. So because of that, you feel that you also have to follow the others. So if you move in this kind of company, and if you are not strong in your practice yet, very easy to swing. So this is when you have to avoid friends like this. Actually, in Buddhism, actually the Buddha says these are not really friends. These are really enemies, spiritual enemies. They might be nice people, but they're actually, or they might be nice to you, but they're actually your spiritual enemies. So avoid the company of such people. And as I said, with wise people. Wise people are people who encourage you, who gives you good advice. In the second instance, the Buddha advised Digajanu. The Buddha says having good spiritual friendship is an important condition for happiness in this world. This is the advice the Buddha gave to Digajanu. In order for us to lead a good, happy life in this world, we need to have spiritual friends. Then the Buddha also gave advice to Sigala, this young man by the name of Sigala. He says that avoid wrong company. Wrong company is what? Like what? Like people who encourage us to cause the loss of our wealth. They encourage us to spend, to waste our money, like drinking. Going out to streets at night. I think in India those nights they go and frequent the streets at night. Or haunting amusement parks. Each time there's amusement, they say, come on, go and enjoy. Doesn't mean that you can't go to amusement park. But there are some people who go there and go and waste all the money. Or gambling. These are the ways in which people waste money. So the Buddha says avoid companies like that.
And there are evil friends. What are evil friends? Evil friends are like gambler, number one, like to gamble. Evil friends say, come lah, we are short one kaki lah, come lah. After all, we gamble amongst ourselves only. Come lah, never mind, come, let's go. That's gambler. Second is womanizer, encourage. This is for young men, you know. For the men, you know. I mean, encourage men, you know, to go and womanize. Those days also they do such a thing. So friends say, come lah, go and womanize. Drinker, a cheat, a swindler, or a man of violence. These are all evil friends. These are not really friends. Yeah? Then the Buddha also advised Digajana. There are some people whom you may think are friends, but they're really not friends. Number one, they are actually enemies who looks like friends. Number one, he gives very little but he expects a lot. Gives you very little but he expects a lot. And every time when he does things, he thinks about his own self, thinks about his own interests. Huh? He gives you, like he might give you a little bit and then he expects you to give him this and that and that and that and that and takes advantage of you. Those are not really friends. Then second kinds of friends is people who have lots of lip service. Lip service, empty of saying, full of promises. They say, never mind, I can promise you. You want to shift house, right? I'll help you, you know. Tell me, anytime. Then you really want to shift house, or you're really in trouble. And say, you cannot lah. I'm sorry, I really have an appointment. And that's not the first time. Every time when it's like that, it's like that. Full of promises. He said, oh, you know, Mr. Tan, you are such a wonderful person, you know. And when he speaks, your heart, which is so nice, right? Full of promises. But actually, he never fulfills his promises. And some people, so easy to pick promise. But there are some people who doesn't say so much, but when you need them, they are there to help you. Now, these are real friends. So, very, very quickly you can find out who your real friends are. It's people who makes all kinds of promises. Never mind. Sure, I support you. But when there's trouble, he's the first one to run away. You never see his face. Huh? Then there's the other one, which is a flatterer. Oh, he speaks so well, even the birds will come down and come to his hands, you know. Speaks so well. This is what whom you see, his whole lips covered with honey. When he speaks, oh, fantastic, a flatterer. Huh? Flatterer when you do bad, especially flatterer, you know. Flatterer who praises you when you do bad things. Oh, they say, oh, you're very daring. I really admire you, know. And you feel really good. For doing a bad thing, you really feel very good. They flatter you. They make you feel good. They approve your evil deeds. They praise you in the face, but behind you, they bite you to pieces. They tear you to pieces. There are many people like that. In front of you, oh, the way they speak. But at the back of you, they talk very bad about you. Then very soon that kind of message comes back to you. But then you know that these are not really true friends. Because true friends are people who will defend you. Even if it is an unpopular thing to do. Sometimes you do a wrong thing, say for instance. Then everybody talks bad about you. But if it's a true friend who supports you, if he believes you, or he comes and advises you that you have done something bad. Or a bad friend is a wastrel, somebody who goes drinking, gambling, haunting shows, nightclubs and all that. Just make you waste your money. So these are not really true friends. What are the true friends? True friends are like this. Number one, a helper. A helper is the one who helps you when you're not aware. Sometimes very careless. And he helps you. He's there to help you. Helper. Protects you when you're not looking, protects you when you're not aware, looks after your own welfare. Number two, he's faithful in happiness and adversity. When you're having prosperity, when you're enjoying themselves, they are there to enjoy, to multiply the happiness. But when you are suffering, when you have problems, they are there to divide your sorrows. So friends are those who multiply your happiness and divide your sorrow. There are some people who are opposite. When you're happiness, they divide your happiness, so your happiness becomes very small. When you're happy, enjoying, they say something, completely have that happiness gone. But when you're suffering, they add more salt to the injury. Make you suffer some more. You suffer like that. They say, then there's another time when you do the same thing also. And I told you not to do. And they say, enough lah, must you rub it in. You suffer and they make you suffer some more. So good friends are those who shares in your happiness and who's always there when you're in trouble. who do not betray you when you're in trouble. Then there is this friend who gives you good advice, who advise you not to do bad things, encourage you to do right things. Friends, good advice. Sometimes we do not want to hear good advice, right? We don't want, especially when we're very angry, especially when somebody has done something wrong to us and we want to take our revenge. At that time, we do not want to hear good advice. We want to hear all the many ways on how we can hit back at that person, and that's the kind of advice we want to listen. Sometimes hearing good advice is not pleasant, especially when we are proud. For people who have a lot of pride in them, not so easy to hear things not so good about ourselves. And that is why to practice the Dhamma, we must not have pride. Sometimes we can hear the truth even from a young kid. And if the young kid tells the truth, we have to listen to the young kid and learn from the young kid that piece of truth. We mustn't be proud. Right? So these are the good friends. Then another one is a sympathetic friend. A sympathetic friend who is the one who doesn't rejoice in your misfortune. There are some people who are not so kindly. When you have misfortune, actually they say, oh, I feel sorry for you. But actually at the back they say, oh, good. They like it. This is especially so when people are competing, sometimes in the same organization. Sometimes they find it very hard, especially if you're competing, same colleagues, and then one day the boss calls you up and starts scolding you for doing a wrong thing. And then at lunchtime they say, oh, the boss scolds you like that. Oh, the boss is terrible. But actually in the heart they say, oh, good, boss scolds you, that means boss gives me a better recommendation. But it doesn't matter, even the boss gives him bad recommendation as well. So these are the kind of things. If it is a true friend is sympathetic. Sympathetic, who helps you when you're in trouble, rejoices in your happiness, and restrain those who speak bad of you. So these are true friends, really good friends. Now, what is important? I mentioned about self-reliance, and I talked about spiritual friendship. What is important is good spiritual friendship. How can we cultivate good spiritual friendship? Now, one of the very important ways we can develop good friendship is the dynamic communication of love and friendship. We need to communicate, either through actions or through speech. If we stop communicating, very soon people will go apart. That is why it was found that sometimes marriages break up. Because after some time, husband and wife don't talk to each other anymore. They just grunts. The husband go by and grunts. And the wife just mutters something which the husband doesn't listen. Or the wife will say, like this lah, like that lah, like this. And the husband will say, read the newspaper. Never listen. So very soon, because there is no communication, if there is communication, sometimes it is destructive communication. This communication to harm each other, to hurt each other. Not the kind of dynamic communication of love and friendship, of concern. If you always have that kind of active communication between people, between friends, that kind of fellowship will remain. Dynamic communication of love and friendship. And for a spiritual friendship, it is sometimes between people who are equal in terms of spiritual development, or even people who are better developed with someone who is not so well developed in communication. That is why it is good for us to associate with people who are wise, and we can always communicate with them. And by that active dynamic communication, we develop better. It's not like talking down, not ordering, not moralizing. If somebody go and moralize, after some time we also cannot stand. Every time when you see him, he lectures you, like this, like this, like this. Very soon you're also scared, very scared. Even though he's got a lot to tell, but he keeps on moralizing you and makes you feel so bad. There are some people who are like that. They might know a lot, but the way they speak makes you feel so little. Then later on you also do not want to kind of associate with them. For us to develop this good friendship, we must always encourage other people. This is a sincere kind of communication, but one of encouragement, one which will help people to develop themselves to the fullest stature, not one which tears down somebody to say, oh, you're just lousy. That is not what we call a positive communication. This communication has to be based on love, on compassion. This is the crux of the matter. To be based on cooperation rather than competition. Sometimes people communicate, but it's a communication of competition. Sometimes you can see even that's between husband and wife, between boyfriends and girlfriends. They communicate, but actually they are competing, competing. And that kind of communication is not really good to develop spiritual friendship. There must be this kind of communication of cooperation, working for the common good instead of for the personal wants. So in other words, that communication is to develop friendship rather than just to develop ourselves, to develop oneself. Now, good spiritual friendship is so important that during the Buddha's lifetime, the Sangha was formed. You see, the members of the Sangha, the community of monks, was formed because it provides the opportunity for people who sees the spiritual vision to live together and to provide guidance to one another. And that is how the community of Sangha grew. It is a brotherhood. So for we Buddhists, we have to develop this kind of brotherhood. We have to develop our fellowship. Most of the time, unfortunately, we do not really develop so much of this. This is really lacking on the Buddhist community. At least the kind of Buddhist community which we see around us. We tend to emphasize a lot on self-reliance, and we forget that spiritual friendship is very important. Now, there was one day, it seems that Ananda, who is the personal attendant of the Buddha, remarked that isn't this spiritual friendship wonderful? They say this spiritual friendship is really it's half of what spiritual life is all about. It's so wonderful, this fellowship with Moggallana, with Sariputta, with all these great saints. Just looking at them, you feel very inspired. Including people who are not that spiritual developed, some of the monks who are just trying to develop themselves. So Ananda says, isn't it wonderful? This is half of what spiritual friendship is all about. Half of what spiritual life is all about. But the Buddha corrected Ananda. The Buddha says, Ananda, this is not half of what spiritual friendship is about. But this is the whole of what spiritual life is all about. So you could see how important spiritual friendship is. That it is the whole of what spiritual life is all about. To have good spiritual friends. To have good spiritual friends. So, by having spiritual friends, which means that, of course, we need friendship all the time. We cannot live our life alone. Sometimes if we choose to do so, we can, of course. But most of the time, we tend to have friends. It is part of our social needs. So, in this friendship, we need someone, or we need others to emphasize our qualities, sometimes to share the things which we lack, sometimes to provide other people what they themselves lack. We need people to help to share inspiration. If you get inspired, you want to share that inspiration with other people. Don't keep it to yourself. Share it with other people. And on the other hand, when other people have that kind of inspiration, they help us. It's like climbing up the mountain. And sometimes when you climb up the mountain, halfway climbing up the mountain, you get very tired. And along that group, you find some people are stronger, some people helping each other. And by helping each other, everybody makes it to the top. It is just like that. And we need each other to kind of reflect our qualities, almost like the gems set out in a necklace. The gems, the jewels are always arranged in such a way that they will reflect light into each other. So finally, when you have a necklace, that necklace is very beautiful, very bright, because each of the gems reflect light into each other. As a whole, it looks much more beautiful than singly. So this is the quality of good spiritual friends. And also we need good spiritual friends to guide us each other spiritually. Actually, if we want to develop ourselves, it is quite good for us to choose our friends with care. Because if some of our friends like to do wrong things, evil things, it is better to avoid them.
Yeah? It is better to avoid them. So, in this, it is very important to know that when we practice this spiritual life, we need to practice these two qualities almost together, not in exclusion, almost together. On one hand, we must realize that if we do not make the effort to develop our positive qualities, nobody can actually help us. Nobody can actually develop these positive qualities for us. Therefore, we have to be self-reliant. We have to use that energy. We have to be inspired by the spiritual vision. But on the other hand, we must realize that sometimes to develop, to have this constant inspiration or energy to develop ourselves, sometimes we need the company of other people as well. Especially the company of like-minded friends. And like-minded friends don't appear just like that. We must make the effort to develop them. And how do we develop this kind of friends? By communicating with each other positively. By communicating in terms of cooperation, in terms of love. Communicate frankly with sincerity. And help to develop each other. And not to kind of become selfish. Alright? So we need these two kind of things in order to develop ourselves as we go along this spiritual path. Just coming back to the story of Jonathan Livingston Seagull, from which the story which I told you when we started this talk. Jonathan Livingston Seagull was in this community of seagulls. He wants to practice flying. He wants to perfect his flying. But all the other seagulls of his community thought he was crazy. And they didn't see the value of what he's doing. You see? So finally Jonathan Livingston Seagull has to go alone. Because otherwise he would have to be like the other seagulls, which he tried, but then he found that even though he tried to be like them, he found that it's not satisfying. Because he knows that there is a better goal. He's guided by a vision, that his vision is he wants to be a seagull who has perfected his flight. And therefore, Jonathan Livingston Seagull left the community. Because he finds that he cannot live in a community and yet, not be part of it. Because that community forces him to be like them. But later on, Jonathan Livingston Seagull met another seagull which brought him to another place. And that place is where all the seagulls learn how to fly. They actually practice flying in order to perfect their flight. It is like that. And Jonathan Livingston Seagull has also a teacher by the name of Chiang. I do not know why they choose a Chinese name for a seagull who was his teacher. And Chiang actually taught him how to fly. And Chiang says, Jonathan Livingston Seagull, don't think that you are limited by your 22 feet wingspan. A seagull is about 22 feet or 22 inches, I think. Seagull couldn't be that long. Otherwise it became an aeroplane already. Must be 22 inches there. He says, Jonathan Livingston Seagull, don't think that you are limited by your 22-inch wingspan. Yeah? Don't think that flying fast means that you can fly 100 miles per hour or 200 miles per hour. Because as long as you've got a number attached to that flight, you are still not flying perfectly. Huh? He says, Jonathan Livingston Seagull, you must get out of the limitations of your wingspan. The same, almost an echo of what the Buddha says. Get out of yourself. Don't think that you're limited by yourself. If you look at yourself like this, oh, I'm limited by this, I am limited by that. But remember that you're not limited. You're actually unlimited. It's only that we must realize this. Remember the story I told you about the jewel? We must not be limited. Same thing. Chiang tells this Jonathan Livingston Seagull, don't think that you're limited by your wingspan. You're beyond that. And don't think that flying 100 miles per hour is fast. You're not fast. The fastest flight is to fly as fast as you can think. And Chiang teaches him how to fly as fast as they can think. And the moment when they think, there they are. And that is what we mean by perfect flying. So actually this story written by, what's his name? Something Bach, is it? Yes, Richard Bach. He wrote that book, Jonathan Livingston Seagull. It's actually a Buddhist story. It's a very Buddhistic story. So it's like, we are like Jonathan Livingston Seagulls. We're going on this spiritual journey. In this spiritual journey, we have to be self-reliant. Like Jonathan Livingston Seagull, we have to be resourceful. We have to look for the opportunity to improve ourselves. We need to be guided by this spiritual vision.
Now, if their friends around us think that we are not doing something useful, and they make fun of us, they encourage us to go wrong ways, we also know that these are really not true friends. So therefore, we should try to minimize associating with them, and instead try to associate with people, who could encourage us onwards. And remember that we should always try to develop and protect this community, to build up this community of fellowship, this spiritual community. Because the moment when you don't try to do that, if everybody forgets about it, then the whole community will fall. And when the community falls, many of these people who at first might be inspired by this spiritual vision will give up hope. And even ourselves, after some time, might even give up. Right? So therefore, keep it alive. Keep this spiritual friendship alive. And to do that, we need to take a lot of effort to cultivate this friendship. And one of the ways to do it is through communication, good communication. And communication is the way we express our thoughts and what happens in our hearts. Expression of our thoughts and our emotions. We have good thoughts and good emotions, and we express it to our friends, such that our friendship can always be maintained. So, just like Jonathan, we are all going on this journey. We are all like this fair bird which is flying to reach the spiritual vision. So with that, I would like to end this talk. Thank you.